In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Moon Tea Podcast. Today we have Cham Jung, the man himself.
I'm honored to be on my first ever podcast of my life.
So for context, Cham has been a close friend for over a decade now. We were friends through church, and we went to high schools that were right next to each other. Cham was the bassist, and I was the drummer. A very wise and level-headed man who has always been worthy of respect.
Very, very kind words.
Yeah,
but not worthy.
Cham is either on track or is on track to be a psychiatrist. He got into his top choice residency at Fresno for UCSF, like a branch out there.
Yeah.
And he'll be graduating, I think, in like a month or something, and he has some time to chill before he's on the doctor grind. So
well,
so you decided to come on a podcast.
Well, technically I've already graduated, so I'm pretty much done.
Nice.
So I'm here hanging out with this guy who's graciously hosted me for the past 5 days.
Dude, it's been a lot of fun.
And fun fact, I have a ringing in my ears on my right side on this ear, because when we used to play together, he was exactly right here as he played the drums. The cymbal was right here, and he would just bang. And to this day, from time to time, like randomly, I would get a high-pitched noise in my right ear, lasting about 5 seconds. So something to remember.
I want it to be memorable, Cham.
Lifelong lasting impact. There we go. That's one.
Lifelong mark.
Yeah.
It's all good. Yeah.
And I don't think Cham has listened to a full episode of Moon Tea Podcast, but for context, Hugh is a friend that I met in San Francisco, and he leads design at his company. He's the first design director.
Wow.
And lives in Arizona. And
where do you live in Arizona?
I'm in Gilbert.
It's
near Tempe. Yeah, Chandler.
Yeah, I was there for a month for a rotation I did. Psychiatry rotation. It was I was in Mesa.
I love it. Yeah, it's right next door. It's where I was born.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay. I was there in August, and it was just the hottest temperature I've ever experienced.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it gets pretty warm here. Not gonna lie.
I mean, they say the Central Valley, where I'm gonna be doing residency, like Fresno. I've stayed in Bakersfield for a few months too. Like, actually, the majority of the time I stayed in Bakersfield, but in California, that's known to be the hot area. And then once I went to Phoenix, I'm like, this is tall. This is good weather. After being in Phoenix for like a month.
Yeah, it's not. You get used to it. They just stay inside. But you're so right. It's compared to a lot of places. Oof, no bueno. That's for sure. No bueno. Yeah, Fresno's like mid California, right? It's between LA and SF.
It's pretty much the midpoint. Yeah, 3 hours to the Bay, 3 hours to LA, hour and a half to Yosemite, 2.5 hours to the beach, maybe.
Amazing.
Right. Yes. It's a pretty big city in California. 5th biggest city. I'm just putting these facts out there because no one knows. People think when I tell people I live in Fresno, like they're like, "Oh, do you live next to a farm?" But technically I do, but it's the 5th biggest city.
Cham is like, yes, but there's other things too.
There's also tons of people just surrounded by agriculture. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's like Wine Valley too, right? Central California.
I think so. But I just have.
I mean, Napa's of course in the north, but you do have central wineries and.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that weather is just suited for growing wine. Like it's always in like the hot kind of areas, like going down to like Temecula, which is like a hot part of that San Diego area. Keep going up to Napa, which is hot too, Sacramento.
Yeah, Temecula is a great place for drinking wine. But just a fun fact for anyone who might be listening. Great. Well, Cham, I know I had some introduction, but was there anything that you wanted to like fill in any blanks or anything you wanted our 5 or 6 listeners to know about you?
Yeah, it has to be more than 5 and 6 now.
7.
I don't know, not really. I mean, not especially. It's my first real trip to New York City. And it's been a great time. I saw the clear blue skies in New York for the first time today, because it's been like rainy, cloudy over the past few days. The first day I got here, it was like somewhat okay. It was just cloudy, not too cold, but afterwards it started to rain. It was chilly. So I'm glad I got to experience the good weather. You know,
What's been your unfiltered experience so far of the New York culture?
I mean, it's I really enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun. Like I just, I'm sure everyone says this. Like it's so like compact and dense, which can be a good and bad thing, but good in the sense of you can just like go to any part of the town you want to on the train. And if you can't find a train, you just ride a city bike and go wherever you need to, or you can just walk. And it's just like so many different people walking on the street. And I think that's I don't think you don't get that too much in like LA or like in SoCal, like in more suburban. I mean, obviously in more suburban areas, like you don't get that. Like even if it's like a very like you're not interacting with the people on the street, like you still see people. That's I don't know. I like that. I like just being like seeing so many different people walking around and like different dogs, like whatever people are doing. So it's cool.
Yeah, I think so for me, it's pretty important to be in like a walkable city, and that's unfortunately LA, I think it has like pockets of walkable areas, but yeah, New York City is like definitely pretty accessible, and like just it's like very dense and you're able to get anywhere and everywhere. Cham, I think you had a pretty good tour of the food available here.
Too much food. I was telling him he could probably burn my body and like power his apartment, like from all the calories I've consumed over the past few days. It's been ridiculous, but no, it's been good. It's been a really good time. Yeah, for sure.
That's fun. Definitely someone who's in med school thinking about calories as energy. There we go. So I'm kind of curious regarding your profession. How'd you get into it? Tell me your story. What's your story?
So just regarding medicine, so for me, I like early on, I had cancer. So that was actually like one of the, before that, I was like 10 years old, but before that as a kid, like, it's not like I was naturally interested in the sciences or anything. Like, if anything, I was into history. But after that moment, just going in and out of the hospital so many times and just seeing what like how truly like impactful like a good doctor can be in your life. Like not only for you, but just the family, of that person. Obviously, that got me really interested into medicine. And actually, just the whole time, just getting treatment too, kind of opened me up to like, wow, the human body is like kind of interesting. Like there's all these like medications being given and like there's all these like chemical like chemo like, and so even back then I would like look it up online, like what am I getting like on Wikipedia back in like what, like early 2000s, like it was still all on Wikipedia. So I'll like look up everything that was happening to me, and like it was just like really fascinating to me. It wasn't really like people think that like it's well, it must have been such a tough time, like very like scary moment. And there were certainly times that were difficult, but I think I was young enough where like it was kind of like I had a loving family and everything. Like we were taking care of me, so it's like, it's like I'm really sick, but I never like and you see like other kids who are like really sick too, but it's kind of like I'm just kind of here, like I just got to go to the hospital and then go to the hospital, take these meds, and like obviously like there are aspects of it that were difficult, like health wise, and like it's like drains your body and all that, as with chemo. But like it was I always say it was like one of the best experiences that like that could have happened to me at that point. Just, with all that. And so that's kind of like what got me into medicine, and from then, like even throughout high school, like I kind of had an idea of med school, if anything, like the healthcare field. I wanted to get into healthcare field, and then that's what got me into medicine. Yeah. Long story short. And then in the midst of med school, I think just throughout that journey of, applying to med school, getting in, and like going through med school, like a lot of mentors like that I had in my life, like telling me to just like, it'll be like, just like stay open to like what fields might like naturally attract you, what you have an affinity to. So obviously, like I wanted to go into pediatric hemonc, which is like childhood cancer. Just after doing my rotations, like I'm like, I want to work with adults too. I don't want to just work with kids as much as I like working with kids. And then, so I was like, oh, I'm already thinking like broader, like internal medicine, maybe like family medicine, of course, peds. And then, but once I did psychiatry, it was a field that I had no intention of going into, and I did it, and it was just really fascinating to me. Like the first time I went into like a psychiatric unit, which and just seeing everything that was happening there, working with the attendings and residents that I had that were with me at the time, who really seemed to enjoy their work and who were really happy and like had a lot of satisfaction out of their career, versus like maybe in like other fields like internal medicine or like surgery, where like you see a lot of like really hardworking but like overworked, maybe burnt out physicians too. And just like seeing that kind of like made me realize, oh, what do I want, out of a career in medicine? Like how much like, there's the work, but there's also like everything outside of it too, like where you can practice, what type of, what kind of settings can you practice in, what's the work-life balance kind of like, and all those things kind of put together, like psychiatry just made sense to me. So I just applied, and then I'm here. Long story short, it wasn't like something like, oh, like I kind of said before, I wanted to go into psychiatry, so I'm going to do it. But it just kind of like naturally fell into it, and loved all my rotations. And I was in Phoenix because I was doing a psychiatry rotation. So I was kind of visiting, like seeing what psychiatry is like in like other states. And so it's been a really good experience so far. And I'm pretty excited for the next 4 years. Yeah, another 4 years.
I recall two moments of like blissfulness in recent history. The first was when, so for context, Cham and I used to go on hikes. We used to get beers at like a local pub on like Friday nights, and I had just finished coding boot camp. Cham was interviewing for medical school, and we would just both go on these hikes, and I would be like, oh, I just got rejected from like, I applied to like 100 jobs and I got rejected from all of them. And then Cham would just be like, yeah, I haven't heard back from any like med schools for interviews. And we just go on this hike and then just be like, in like 5 years, you're going to be a doctor. I'm going to be like a senior engineer. We're going to be doing all this interesting work. And then we would just like come back from the hike, just being like, yeah, like we can just like work through this next week. And that was, I think that was a pretty rough time for both of us, but it was like, I'm so glad we were like kind of like going through our own thing. And then I remember Cham one day like calls me, he's like, dude, I got in. And I was just like, I was like so happy. And then from there, Cham would visit LA to like see his mom, and then like sometimes I would be in LA. So I don't know, I would see Cham here and there, and then every like 6 months or so I would get a call from Cham. He's like, oh, I just finished a rotation, I'm like moving right now. I mean, he had a lot on his plate, and the second time I was really happy was when Cham was like, dude, I got my first choice residency. And I was like, dude, of course, Cham, of course. Like, why would they not accept you? So
dude, long journey indeed. Like going back to the hikes, it's like, it's the uncertainty, like there's different kinds of stress, right? Like I think it's like the uncertainty of things that like really get people, like at least it got me, like in that transitional period. It's like, am I even gonna get into med school? Like if I don't get in, like what's gonna happen? Like you always think about like if you don't get in, like what happens next kind of. But like I think even for you, like once you get a job, kind of like it's kind of like at that point, it's like, I mean, there's always, the future is always going to be uncertain, but in the same time, you have something and you're going to get experience and you're getting paid also. Or like, okay, I just got to do the work now and like build from here. And at least I have something.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I remember one particular low point when Cham and I went on a hike, and then we came back, and my car was broken into. The window was shattered.
I remember that.
Someone took my gym bag and my backpack. That backpack had my laptop. I even left my phone in there. And so they took everything. They even took my climbing shoes. I was like, dude, is this even gonna fit you? But yeah, I remember that was like a particularly low point because,
thank God.
Yeah, because I was like, oh man, I only have like, yeah, I mean, this sucks because I don't have, there's not enough cash to like in my bank account to buy another laptop. I mean, yeah, I was able to work it out and everything, but yeah, I remember just being like, fuck, like this this sucks.
Didn't you have some Bitcoin in it too or something?
Yeah, I had.
Were you able to get it?
No, I didn't. That was a lesson learned. Very expensive lesson learned.
Oh man. Yeah, no, I remember that day. Yeah, it was like so random. Jeez.
Yeah, I haven't hiked there since.
I mean, it's not really like a hike, like a true hike. It's more of a fire trail that like everyone just goes up. It's like a dirt road, but it's like close to like a lot of residential areas, so people go there. But yeah, I haven't been back there since either, to be honest. Yeah.
You guys have come so far. It's amazing, both of you, all of us. Hey, there we go.
Yeah, we sure have.
Kind of like curious. You were mentioning how a lot of different factors caused you to find your way to choose psychiatry. One of the factors was you were intrigued or interested by the way the psychiatric wards and or units were run or set up. I'm kind of curious. Don't know much about them, so.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to describe it is like the feeling I had going in is like, oh, this is like kind of like bizarre. Like it's like because you walk in, it's it's different from a regular hospital unit where people, you have patients in the rooms and like they're in their bed for the most of the time, right? And so the hallways are pretty clear. Like you just go into their room, you chat with them, you do whatever you need to do. And usually in the psych, in the behavioral health units, like the patients are free to roam, the units. And so you will have, no matter how sick or not sick they are, like whether it's depression, whether it's like a psychotic episode with schizophrenia or like a manic episode, you'll have everybody just kind of in that one area. And so they'll be wandering around and like, going to group therapy or maybe going to take a shower or like shave, getting food, talking to the nurses. There will be, it's a common scene to see patients just kind of leaning against the nurses' windows. It's like just imagine like behind like TSA, no, not TSA, but like it's like it's not a bulletproof glass, but like a very like sturdy window, and all the nurses and the kind of doctors go behind it, and like in front of it is where all the patients are, and some of them are like leaning against it, like chatting with the nurses. So it's a very like different environment than what you would expect to see in a hospital. And especially coming from me, like I hadn't had much experience within the mental health field. So like it was a completely new experience for me. But it was like really fascinating. And also like I think what really made me want to go into it was after really just getting a chance to interview patients and like getting to know them and their treatment trajectory and how they improve or don't improve, like, and just learning more about this, like the severe mental illnesses themselves. Like you learn how debilitating so many of these how debilitating all the conditions are in psychiatry. And I just personally think that it's within medicine, like some of the most debilitating conditions you can have, because you can have somebody with cancer who's very happy and who has a very enriching life, you know, who actually may even die peacefully, and in the arms, or surrounded by the love of their family, for example, But you can have somebody who's maybe very successful, has tons of family and friends around them, and still be severely depressed and be suicidal. And so it's very like, wow, like this is something I want to learn more about, and like something I want to get into. And I just feel like it's a field that's also just a lot in need to, and it's a field where you can do a lot of good. Yeah, so it's kind of one aspect of it. Yeah.
Cham, do you have any kind of like wild stories from your time in the psychiatric unit? Or if you're allowed to share.
Well, I mean, I think it's after you see it a while, it's like not, I mean, the first time you see it's like, well, what is this? It's like there's people like maybe someone's just laying on the floor, like, so that's like a common, it's like pretty common you can see that. And like, I mean, there are like, I don't want to say it's like wild or crazy or anything. It's like they're really sick, like they're suffering, even if they don't like, it might not look like it, they're all suffering deep inside. And even the most, like people who, like if you want to get an episode of like psychosis, might be like, you just go to the New York subway, right? You'll see people like talking to themselves, like responding to things in their head, and just like, kind of doing maybe like, what they're doing is a little disorganized, like what they're doing is like kind of, it's out of sorts, right? And you just know it.
Mm-hmm.
They're very unkempt, maybe hygiene wise. So I mean, that's like, you would see like most of the patients who come in, especially in an urban setting in a psychiatric unit, it's like kind of the patient population you would see. But in terms of like going back to crazy stories, I mean, like like a common like thing you would hear is like just like paranoid delusions, like someone believes like a government has implanted a chip in their head. It's common for I haven't seen this myself, but it's like it happens that like maybe they think the government has like someone has planted something in their body, so they go and try to dig it out,
Well,
and that can cause them to go into the emergency room and require surgery. So it can be, it can be very dangerous. Maybe like like people, just like people, it's just like, nothing like especially like boom, like pops up in my mind, but like you just like just the things that you hear them say like every day. It's kind of like, I have, you ask them, well, how much, like, will you be able to support yourself if you were to leave? Because a lot of them want to leave, obviously. Be like, yeah, I have plenty of money in my account. And in fact, I have $10 billion in my account, and I got to go leave the unit right now because I have 8 children that I need to take care of. So it's like, if you hear that for the first time, like it would be like, wow, that's like, it's kind of wild and like crazy, but it's, well, I mean, it's unfortunately like, what can happen in diseases like schizophrenia, or like you have, it's kind of like what the disease is. So I don't know.
yeah. Well, I feel like it's a really interesting experience to get to know these kinds of people. Can you talk about any, just like after spending time with people in psychiatric units, like, I don't know, can you kind of just like talk about your reflections on like this like broad idea of human condition, and like, yeah, like how do you think about your own behavior, and like how does it make you view like people differently, or how like, yeah, how do you reflect on that?
I think, well, that's a big question, but I think a lot more people are like suffering in silence than you imagine. I think, like, to be honest though, in my limited experience so far, it's been with like just more of the just by chance in the hospitals I read, there are more like patients with like kind of the patients I was talking about before. But every now and then you would get maybe somebody who attempted suicide come in, who is in thought process wise is able to like have a conversation with you, and like able to, you're able to connect with them a lot more easily. I mean, it's like so many things contribute to, like, I think it starts like things like, major depressive disorder, and like, I mean, the end, the thing that everyone wants to prevent is like a suicide attempt. Obviously, that's like the worst case scenario. And, in the beginning, maybe it starts off with, I am, issues with work, issues with, like I feel like I'm at this age and I'm not doing what I'm, like where I should be at this age, anxiety about that, which leads to depression. Issues with family, maybe you have, I'm just thinking about a patient that I talked with, who had a gender dysphoria, right? Like he is homosexual, but like he has trouble coming out to his family because they're conservative Catholic family, like struggles with that, and not able to be his true self, not able to share his true, like he just can't be who he is, family, like, issues with friends, like work, like I already said work, like I'm, and also work can lead to like physical issues too, like if you're unloading unloading boxes into Walmart all day and you develop chronic back pain, at least nerve pain, you get depressed about that too. Like, I think like I don't think I'm answering your question directly, but it's hard to give a direct answer to that. But I think there's so many, like life is stressful, life is suffering. What like Buddha says that, right? Like there are like inherently, of course, like life is, it can be difficult. And I think we suffer in that context because especially when we keep to ourselves and we don't, we isolate ourselves and we don't, have that connection. We don't have like connections outside ourselves. So whether it's with other friends, whether it's a higher power, whether it's a purpose in life, and like that, I think that you just kind of learn more and more. I mean, as you just get older, you learn about that, obviously, but you see it a lot more. You see it in like, in psychiatry and mental health. Obviously, that's like a major, like, that is your job, talking with patients about these kind of things. And all that to say that I think connection is very important. And I think we've learned from the COVID pandemic, over the past like 2 years, like what isolation does, like to our mental health and our own well-being. And so that was a long-winded non-answer to your question, but it's just some of the things I've learned in my very few rotations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It probably just when you relate or talk with a lot of people, sometimes you don't think about it, but sometimes you like probably pick things up, especially in the New York subway. And you're like, oh, that does not seem healthy or something like that. But I'm kind of curious. There's a bunch of different mediums or modalities through which people can seek mental and spiritual remedies or help. And I'm kind of curious of what your thoughts are on the differences. And like, there's therapeutic practices, therapy, psychiatry. Then there's other less mainstream ones, such as life coaches or others like somatic practices or the Reiki or Eastern methodology practices. Kind of curious of what is taught in schools or what you think about them.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, number one, in medical school, we aren't taught about any of those things for the most for the most part. Med school is mostly focused on like, even in psychiatry, like in the beginning, like it's very medication focused, like psychopharmacology, like, which is like, makes sense because we're just starting out. Like we have our training to, that's what our residency training is kind of for, to learn more like about psychotherapy and kind of beyond, the overall learning more about, our role in the larger mental health field. And I think maybe it's also a good time to say I'm not a licensed medical professional. I haven't even started training. I just barely graduated. So don't take anything that is discussed in this podcast as medical advice. Please seek a professional help. But in regards to, like I think, you mentioned things like Reiki, like the alternative like therapies that we kind of refer to, talked about therapy. Well, number one, like let's talk about therapy and psychiatry first. I think in any mental health condition, like therapy, I believe should be like a component of your treatment path. Because so much of like mental health, you have to be able, a lot of it's like relating to our thought processes, our emotions, and our inability to process emotions. Maybe there's, trauma in your life, or, it's something, like a traumatic event happened, you're not able to process it, and that trauma is manifesting in your life in ways maybe like you wouldn't expect, in your relationships, your health, your own health, and that sort. And so therapy, like in all studies, even in psychiatry, like the medication plus therapy is always the best approach. The data shows that. So like, yeah, like the way I see like medications is, it is like, depending on who you talk to, in like the early, you talk to like, in the early 90s, like there was like this big expansion of like neuroscience and like studies of the brain. And like we thought maybe we can pinpoint like a neurological, biological basis of like things like depression, and we can like find a pill to solve it, right? But obviously, I mean, like the things like depression, it's such a complex topic. Our brain is such a complex thing. It's arguably the final frontier of like medicine and like science, because you don't know anything about it to this day. And so like in the context, like with medications, like it's obviously like if maybe like, because I'm kind of like going all over the place, but depressed mood is like, going back to depression, depressed mood is like, it's a normal emotion you feel, depression is like, when we talk about major depressive disorder, it's like changes in your sleep, maybe like you have like hobbies and you don't want to do them anymore, you have like slowness in your body that can happen sometimes, like, you have like no energy, can't concentrate on anything, you can't eat anything, or you're eating too much. So it's like, it's not only just a depressed mood, but it's like there's a lot more to it. And if it's like to the point where, for example, you can't get out of bed in the morning, and you stop going to work, stop going to school, classes, then I would say it's pretty severe, and like medications can help at least get you to a point where you can do therapy, where you can kind of like process a lot of things that you're going through and like form that connection, and maybe like, develop coping skills, because depression is, I think it's not gonna go away, like the thoughts, like in your anxiety, depression, those are things that we will face throughout our lives. And like, because you take this pill like on a regular basis, I mean, it can definitely cause remission. It can help you. Just the pill itself can help many people, and it does, it certainly does. But I think, for example, if you want to get off the pill, then, you got to start developing the coping skills, and you got to start, figuring out how you're going to manage your depressive episodes when it happens. So I think, and of course, things like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, I think arguably you have to take medication for those, because they can be they can be very, you can have dangerous complications of no treatment. And so there's some, but do you have like an idea of, well, like I kind of saying like things like schizophrenia, like bipolar, like do you guys have like an idea of like what they are like? But I mean, they're like,
Feel free to give quick definitions if you want to any new listeners.
When you talk about like bipolar, like, you talk about like mania, and so up is a mania, right? And depression is when you go down. So if you talk with people, I think with bipolar, a lot of people, they kind of, want to go down this too deep of a rabbit hole here, but
Let's do it.
like mania, like it's kind of like, it's associated with elated, or it can be irritable mood too, but generally like the classic mania is elated mood. And so you feel great, you feel like you're on top of the world. You start having things like flight of ideas of things that you want to accomplish in this world, grandiose ideas, to the point where you can, maybe, if you were manic, Jonathan, you might start selling all your cryptocurrency and invest it into some, I don't know, some new form of silver that came out or something, right? Because you think it's a great idea. So it can lead to serious consequences. as a result of mania. But actually, the most severe part of bipolar is the depressive episodes that come after, because I think about like almost 25% of people who have bipolar actually can commit suicide because of the lows of depression are so low from the highs that it can get that bad. And so with that, we have things like lithium, these are called mood stabilizers. There's like things like lithium, things like Depakote, and those will kind of stabilize your mood. And so for something like that, without it, you really have to, with just therapy, you would have to manage your high states and your low states with just a therapist. And I think that's, a little, it might be out of the realm of a lot of, if for just psychotherapy, out of the realm for it to really make a, like a meaningful change in those mood states. And so for like things like bipolar, like you definitely need, for the most part, like medications in your treatment plan to, be able to manage it. As well as things like schizophrenia, like kind of I mentioned the example of, the subway person in New York. They're not able to take care of themselves. Like for the most part, like, maybe they'll get food in the trash, or like a nice vendor will give them food. For the most part, they're on the streets and they kind of don't have a good grasp of reality. And I'm sure, like, you can imagine they're completely isolated from their families, right? And so you might, you'll need like a medication, like an antipsychotic, to help, curb those psychotic symptoms, like delusions, hallucinations, whatever they may be experiencing, to allow them to have a more organized and like a life that allows them to kind of function in society a little better. Like those two, like, are generally within the realm of severe mental illness. And yeah, I will definitely say you need to see a psychiatrist to manage those conditions. But going back to just regular major depressive disorder, you can have like mild, moderate, severe. Maybe like a mild case, you might not need to see a psychiatrist, and just talking to somebody might help you. Whether it's even just amongst your friends, like a close social group you have, or whether it's professional help, it can help alleviate a lot of the symptoms and help you gain a bigger perspective of your own life and help see yourself in a new way, which is what therapy really does for you. Like, allows you to form a new relationship with yourself and your thoughts and your emotions. Because when we're in our our day-to-day lives, you just kind of like run with it, right? You're not really thinking about like, oh, I feel this way today. Oh, maybe I'll just go to work and like I'll deal with it later. Or you might not be noticing a lot of behaviors that you're doing without somebody kind of looking into you. In that case, like, I think therapy obviously helps a lot of people, and it's good to, even just talking with friends, I think seeking therapy is becoming a lot more normalized, which is good. There's less and less stigma of seeking mental health treatment, which is great. Those are my thoughts on therapy and psychiatry, I guess, the role of medications, and any alternative treatments. I think, like, if it helps you, there's not going to be like placebo-controlled double-blind studies on like the effects of acupuncture or like Reiki, but like, it provides, like, kind of the sense of meaning, and like something like a treatment coming from outside yourself. Like, it can be very powerful for many people. In fact, even in medicine, you can maybe consider placebo as like something like that. Like, and placebo is very effective. It works. And so I think, as long as maybe the alternative treatment you're engaging in isn't harmful to yourself physically, or like to others, or in whatever it is, I think people should be free to explore and like seek ways of healing in this crazy world that we're living in. I don't know.
Makes a lot of sense. I believe the quick clarification between therapists and psychiatrists is therapists cannot give and prescribe medicine and medication, and psychiatrists can. Is there anything else I might be missing, or is that?
No, you pretty much got it on the nail. There's therapists, there's you might see clinical psychologists who do therapy as well, and they do also psychometric testing. They're kind of the expertise on those. But psychiatrists, at least in the United States, are the only ones able to prescribe medicine because they go to medical school, they have a license to practice medicine, and so they prescribe medications. Yeah.
Curious. Do psychiatrists also perform therapeutic practices, or do they partner with a therapist and then?
So vast majority of psychiatrists will partner with a therapist or a psychologist. So psychiatrists will do generally medication management, while the others do therapy. But if you ever see, the psychiatrists in Manhattan, there's a lot of therapy only practices that are out there. So you can definitely do one or the other. Yeah.
Amazing.
Sorry, that was a very long-winded discussion about things I met
Dude,
in this field, but
Cham, that's the point.
I didn't
of
do it
this-
justice, but yeah.
That's perfect. That's great.
That's the point of the podcast, Cham.
It's great. It really is.
People are always like, "Oh, I've just been talking about myself," and we're like, "Yeah, you're the guest on the podcast."
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think I've always never been like one to I don't know, like talking about myself, and like it's not something you do only in like, I guess, like you in an interview you're like prepping for it and stuff, but like in general, like you're not like talking about like, oh, this is who I am, and like, which brings up an interesting point. Like I think maybe like for me personally, I don't do enough like self-reflecting, like why, like sometimes it's just like I'm doing this, I have like ideas in my head, but I'm not like really like articulating it down. Like or where do I see myself in like 10 years or something? Like if you were to ask me that, then I would be like, oh, like maybe here it's not really like concrete. I have general ideas.
Cham would be like, "Yeah, I'd be an outpatient at like blah blah blah."
Like, but I mean, just like who am I, like what was my past like? I think but these things, like it's common to talk about obviously in therapy, but like even just with yourself, like, just to like reflect on your journey to this day. Just me reflecting back on this trip, like like to be honest, I haven't really reflected back on this trip. It's just like, oh, I ate a lot of food. I went to a museum, went to top of the Rockefeller Center, like like, oh, what did I learn about New York City? Like I didn't think about that, like really deeply. Or like what did I think about, like how do I see myself in a big urban city like this? Like, questions I haven't really thought about, but
It's okay. You can reflect later.
there's always time to reflect. Yeah.
There really is. But while we have you, let's reflect on some other things that might be more interesting, such as what are your thoughts as currently the most well-read in the room on these subjects, the state of the mental health of the United States and or larger scaled, and how we are treating certain things?
Well, I think the biggest issue is there just aren't enough mental health professionals in America. Maybe not in New York City, but in like just everywhere else outside of like LA, San Francisco, like the big city. In fact, in like places like Bakersfield or Fresno, there might be a waiting list of months, like like a month, like 2-3 months to see a psychiatrist.
Really?
That's a long time.
way.
Yeah.
That's a long time for someone to be debilitated and depressed and or
So I mean, it's always a challenge when we when somebody comes into the hospital and they find out they need like psychiatry, like they need to see a psychiatrist or going to a psychiatric hospital. Like you have to wait, and there's like you have to hold him in the hospital for a while, like while there's a bed clearing up, or while there's an appointment coming up that's cleared. I mean, it's fortunately, psychiatry is getting more and more popular. It's like more in demand, especially in medical students. Like I'm in psychiatry, like it's like a field that's like becoming more and more, like I guess attractive. I guess like kind of like things we talked about before, like the stigma of mental health is decreasing. Like you have like celebrities talking about mental health, like we're talking more about mental health. So it's like something that's becoming more and more like unfortunately like acceptable, which unfortunately, like, it's a problem that's plagued our entire history as humans, even Aristotle and the early Greeks were like talking about mental illnesses.
Ooh.
And it's still here to this day, I mean, I think that's like the biggest problem, I would say. I think something else that kind of comes in my head is like this, especially maybe in psychiatry specifically. I don't know much about therapy, but in psychiatry, it's like just kind of like prescribing only and just like not really connecting with the patient. Like it's like here, like, like not really like, because you hear like really bad experiences of, unfortunately, of patients who've seen a psychiatrist maybe and like kind of like, oh, he's just a pill pusher, she's a pill pusher, like, and then you get really turned off by it, I think everyone wants to be heard, especially in of all places like psychiatry. You want to go into like someone's office and like be comfortable and be, you want to talk to someone who's open and like someone who's willing to take you in, and I think that's a problem not just in psychiatry, but like I think it's critical in psychiatry to address that issue. Which honestly just comes down to like, do you like how much like empathy? Well, and like I talk about like maybe they don't care about as much about the patient, but so much of it is also burnout. There's like a lot of burnout in medicine too. Like, like many physicians, they feel like they're just a cog in the system. You can't like practice the way they want to, kind of dictated by insurance companies, and so you get burnt out. And so like you don't have you have enough to give to your patients who come in. And so like it's common to see, like, for example, maybe in like primary, like internal medicine, like you'll see a doctor like, oh, just take this and go, kind of. I think that's a common experience we may possibly all of us have maybe experienced. I don't know, but it's unfortunate that it also happens in psychiatry too. But and to be honest, I guess I could go to any field, any like field that you work with, where you work with people, So I don't want to like blame, no one's to blame, I guess, but everyone's best. But I think at least for me, I hope I have, when I see patients that I can, I can be that person for them, that's my hope. I think if someone who's brave enough to come into the office, it's like, wow, it's like, wow, you made it here, It's like just coming in is like a huge accomplishment, Seeing a therapist is like a huge accomplishment. And it's like fight in mental health rather than like, obviously if you're sick and you gotta like, oh, I have a rash, I'll go to see a doctor. It's not like that hard. Depressed or something, or if you're really anxious about something, or you're like, oh, should I see a therapist? Like you think about it, you like rationalize it. Let's look at how much it costs, let's do the pros and cons of this. People kind of like really like, there's a lot of those, I think, we naturally go through to seek mental health treatment. And hopefully in the future, it's a lot more psychiatrists out there, more mental health professionals out there that are more accessible. And it can be like part of like your general like medical treatment, or like your medical, like when you check in.
Dude, no surprise that you rocked all your interviews, by the way.
I'm not sure about that, but
they're probably fighting for Cham.
I am not sure about that. In fact, I was extremely nervous during all my interviews, and I can't believe they accept that I was ranked in any of them. But yeah,
I believe it. I was like, of course.
Oh man, yeah, that was a very stressful time. I think just the interviews are very like this interview is like very like it's very casual, so it's like I didn't really feel nervous, but like I think for any like a job interview, it's like so much pressure,
Yeah.
And you put yourself in a lot of pressure too. Like I have to get this, like
Yeah.
like I really want this job, or I have to get this job, and it's like every word matters, and you start overthinking everything. It's like
also to get to where you are, you have to do every single step of the way there well enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to go to college. It's like, okay, I'll go to college, sure, but you have to do well in college. You have to have the right grades and the right classes, and you have to be sure that you want it. And then you see that like 80% of everyone else is dropping out. And then after that, you have to do like the right fellowships, and you need the right like letters and the right like mentors, and then you need to apply, and then like once you're there, you have like board exams, and then you have rotations, and it's like, and you're doing night shifts, and you're doing 24-hour shifts, and then you have to get into you have to interview. Like,
oh, there's a lot. Yeah, there certainly is a lot. But I think yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of things that, like, even you've heard about all these things, like these different hurdles, but it's like, it's still, like, at the end of the day, I think in America, getting in is probably maybe the hardest part. Like, once you get in, well, also, I mean, once you get in and you like survive through it, you pass, you have to at least, well, these days you can pass, but before you still had to get like a certain score on your, like, it's called like USMLE steps, like, residency want you to see like a certain number for them to interview you. But there are also plenty of people who I know, like, who scored lower than like maybe what you're supposed to get, but then like any good program looks at your application like holistically, and so they see like your other qualities and like what else have you done, like, and they still give you an interview. And there are many successful physicians out there who didn't do everything perfect, and I think no one does everything perfectly. Like, there's a cost to doing things like exceptionally well in medicine, like a huge social cost and personal cost.
yeah, Cham and I know like one or a few people who were antisocial for like a number of years in life. And I mean, that was definitely a cost, because like people who this person was close to, just like, he didn't see any of them for a number of years, because he was like taking the MCAT every single day for a year, like a maniac. like I think he did well, and like, and I respect it because he wanted it bad enough. But yeah, there's definitely like a consequence to that. But yeah, I guess it's competitive. It's like sometimes it's what you got to do to like stand out. But I will say there is no such thing as a lazy, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, oh, I don't know, like, there may be those lazy after getting, but I mean, I'll say to get through med school, like, like, there's certainly a lot of work, obviously, and it's demanding rotations you do. But I think if if you feel like medicine, though, I think, or you can use your, like, I think if you really love science, but like you want to apply it in like a, well, I mean, it's meaningful to me, like, apply it in a meaningful way, then it's like medicine's a great, not meaningful for everybody.
Cham, we ask all of our guests this question, but do you have any parting thoughts, any words of wisdom for our 5 or 6 listeners?
Oh my God, parting thoughts. Parting thoughts are, I hope that if anyone's listening, and I think if you have the idea that, oh, maybe I should see a therapist, then maybe I think you should. And there might be maybe things holding you back, but I think, why not dance if you can? Even like, there are ways, even if you have like something like Medi-Cal, or like not Medi-Cal here, but like a lower income like health insurance, there's still ways to get it. Might be more difficult, but I think everyone who has that like thought, oh, it's just, I want to seek help, and you've been putting it aside, I think maybe, I hope that you take the chance to try to explore that a little more, and like, if anything, explore that a little more, talk about it to somebody else, if anything, a friend, parent, coworker. If not getting, if therapist, at least talk about it with someone. And I think we all learn so much about ourselves from doing that, and that's, I don't know. I don't know what else. Yeah. I don't know.
Makes a lot of sense. And one final question is, do you have any proactive health, mental health, physical health tips or suggestions for people to possibly impart?
Yeah, I mean, something I gotta follow too is the lowest hanging fruit is maybe like diet and exercise. Like that, I think can not only help your mental health, but maybe help eliminate 80 to 90 of conditions that plague our healthcare system in the first place. It's the lowest hanging fruit, but also the hardest. It's hard to continually keep a good diet. It's hard to continue exercise. But I think if there's some, whether it's anything that you can enjoy that involves exercise or even diet, like if there's some, healthier recipes that maybe you can try learning, like change one little thing, like one meal a day, or what, like you just cut sodas out of your diet, like the easiest things to do it. That's probably the best thing for just not mental health, but just your life.
I mean, physical health will, if you have good physical health, it'll help your mental health.
Exactly. Yeah.
So on top of that, what about for people who have excellent diet and excellent exercise and excellent sleep? What would you recommend?
Then, I don't know. Maybe it's time to see a therapist, or think about, maybe like, I don't know, like, do you really feel connected with your family, or how are things with your family? Like, do you keep in contact with them? Like, are you able to, or is there are there difficulties there, like your friends? Because we're social creatures, and even if you're alone and you have the perfect diet and you exercise an amazingly amount in a week, you have the best sleep, you'll still feel very isolated and you might not feel the best. So,
Amazing.
You heard it here first.
What is it's one of the opening lines of, I think it's like Anna Karenina. It's like all happy families are similar, but all unhappy families are different in their own right. And so everybody, I hope you enjoyed this podcast and this episode. It's been really deep and really informative, and Cham, can't thank you enough for coming on and spending the time joining us here.
Of course. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
And so with that, we've come to the end of another episode of the Moon Tea Podcast, a podcast where we talk about craft, community, and building meaningful careers. If you ever have a guest that you'd ever want to refer or suggest to us, please reach out. Or if you want to give us any feedback or just want to send some notes of appreciation, you can reach us at moonteapodcast@gmail.com or go to our website, moonteapodcast.com. Well, with that, take it easy and tune in next time. See ya.
See you.
Peace.